Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Salam Media. I'm your host, Dhakir Dawood. I'm going to be keeping you company for the next hour on this very special platform. Yes, another week broadcasting from the room, but this time we're going to have jam-packed action that will be keeping you guys intrigued to the show all night long. So, 2021 has come to an end. A memorable year indeed for everybody. Such a valuable year for those in sport. Finally, we see the normality of matches happening. Yes, there is a COVID break here and there, and fans finally returning to the stadium. Tonight, we're going to be wrapping up all things football with a very interesting panel. I'm going to be joined by Coach Farouk Khan, number one. He's going to be giving us his insight of the game. And then we're going to be joined by a football enthusiast, football analyst, family man. And he claims to be an actually nice guy. Shakes Rampedi is going to be joining us, telling us everything there is to know about what's happening in the world of football and his perspective on everything in it. I mean, it's been a great year. For those of you that have just tuned in or you took a break from your screens, Amazulu, believe it or not, are leading Marumo Gallants 1-0 with 80 minutes that's been played already. Well, could Draw FC, also known as Amazulu, be well on their way to victory, claiming 3 points rather than one once again this season? Coach Benny, could his fortunes and stars finally align? Seems like this could have been drawn in the stars. Who knows? No pun intended there. But well, we're going to go to a short break. When we come back, we're going to be chatting all things football. We're going to be wrapping up the year 2021 from antics and tactics, from chairmen being kicked out of stadiums to head coaches not being allowed into stadiums, from COVID ravaging through the league to a national team coach disagreeing on a few things with local coaches. All been splashed in the media. Well, to get first-hand news and first-hand updates, you got to stay tuned to the show because we're going to be giving you everything that you need to know. So stay tuned. We're going to be back right after this break.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Reliable access to clean water could save thousands of lives each day. With proper sanitation and easy access to fresh, clean water, communities can flourish. Our Thirst Relief Appeal provides clean water to communities in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East by building deep wells and providing sustainable water and hygiene solutions. A monthly donation of as little as 700 Rand could build a well for a community in need. That's only 23 Rand a day. Donate today. www.pennyappeal.org.za or call 031 11 00 573. Penny Appeal. Small change, big difference.
What makes Randery Jewelers the optimum place for your memorable gift? Is it our range of exclusive, high-end, luxurious jewellery? Or is it our master craftsmanship of all your bespoke jewellery needs? We believe it's because at Randery Jewelers, we know just how to make your special moments last forever. Whether it's for a wedding, anniversary, or just a simple gift to show your love, trust Randery Jewelers to make it special. www.randeryjewelers.com. Make your moments last forever with Randery Jewelers, the family name you can trust.
Where in this dunya am I going to find a scarf to match my outfit? Only at Al Shazia, the scarf specialists. Enjoy a better shopping experience at our brand new premises. Bigger store, bigger ranges, best quality, excellent service, same friendly faces, ample parking. Al Shazia, now at 130 Brickfield Road, U&G Building, Overport, Durban. Grand opening on Friday, 17th December at 2 p.m. inshallah. Al Shazia, the scarf specialists.
Listen to something fresh. Listen to Salam Media, your humanitarian broadcaster.
Good evening, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Salam Media. I'm your host, Dakir Dawood, and as I said before the break, that we're going to be chatting all things football, all things PSL, international football. We might dabble into it, we might dribble around it, who knows? You'll have to stay tuned to find out. But right now, I'm going to introduce a very special guest this evening. He goes by the name of Shakes Rampedi. He calls himself a football analyst. He calls himself a family guy. Overall, nice guy. I mean, I know the truth, but I mean, the public will have to find out real soon. Good evening, Shakes. Thanks for joining me on the show this evening. Just a quick introduction. Tell us a bit more about yourself. When did your journey in journaling everything that's happening in sports start?
Yeah, so obviously I'm Shakes Rampedi, as you've introduced me. I try to be a nice guy, as I've described on my bio, in all honesty. And yeah, the journey started 4 years ago. 2017, that's when the journey started. My brother who's Shabzi Medallion, he's also a known musician. And he told me that, I watch a lot of football. And because I watch so much football, why don't I just put up a phone and just record and just post it on social media? And I thought to myself, I was just so scared. I was like, what if people judge me? What if people say this and say that? And eventually I started it, and with his guidance, of course. And from then on, he just let me run with it. And from then on, I've just spoken about everything local, because obviously I want our local game to get better. I want our local game to improve. Eventually with time, I do watch what goes on international as well, because I love football like that. But yeah, the aim was to just sort of speak about local and grow the game. And from then on, it's been a fruitful journey. It introduces me to people like Takia as well, so which I'm very 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 grateful to be here.
Well, I mean, one of your few 18,000 what 500 followers on Twitter. You've got quite a thing going on for yourself. Would you consider yourself a sports influencer?
Look, I wouldn't want to. I didn't do it to become a sports influencer, that's for sure. But the followers are rising. There's people who are loving the content, people who are sharing the content and viewing it as well. So I'm very grateful for the support that I get, and yeah, to more and more, I guess. Right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, besides the fact that you're independent and you basically share your own thoughts and you don't belong to any organization,
Yeah, that's that's
what
that's
else
that's the key.
what else do you think is the cutting edge to the public wanting to see your content?
I guess for me, it's a thing of I always told myself, how would I be able to voice my opinion and speak about even what you would say is the hard hitting topics, but without having to insult? Don't insult, don't be cruel, but obviously state your opinion that the best way that you can and be as objective as possible. Because I've never hid the fact that I support Kaizer Chiefs, for example. I grew up supporting Kaizer Chiefs, but my whole aim was to always be objective. If Pirates are playing really well, I'll say they're playing really well. If Sundowns is playing much better than Kaizer Chiefs, I'll state it. I won't be scared to say that. So I guess me not being biased towards Kaizer Chiefs or being biased to any single club, I will state something if it's good, and I'll state something if it's bad. And I think people have enjoyed the fact that, okay, he stated he supported Kaizer Chiefs when he was a kid, but he's able to say Amazulu played better than them on the day. So that thing that sometimes separates me from everybody else.
Well, it's nice that you can draw up an opinion like that. You spoke about Amazulu. For those of you that are tuned in, Amazulu are on their way to getting a victory this evening um, against Marumo Gallants. If I'm not mistaken, earlier on we did see that the score was 0-0. It's now full time. Amazulu win this game 1-0. Shakes, come on, straight off the cuff here. This is what it's all about. Amazulu 1-0 against Marumo Gallants. How bad did the team from KZN need this victory?
They needed it as badly as I need sleep. In all honesty, I think they needed it because they had gone on I think 7 in a road draws. I mean, how in the world do you predict a team to go on 7 draws in a row? And also consider the fact that they've also already had 12 draws within the league already. And that's a huge chunk considering the fact that only 30 games within the league are played. And already you have got 12 draws and we've only reached halfway now. So I think they needed it. And funny enough, because everybody else was sleeping around the table, I think that pushes them up to fourth. They're similar on points with the Orlando Pirates. They're not far behind from Kaizer Chiefs. So I think the fact that maybe their draws might have helped in the fact that they didn't lose points. They're picking up one after one after one, but they definitely needed it for sure.
No, definitely. I mean, if you look at it, this season has been pretty inconsistent somewhat. They started off on a high. Coach Benny came in. Amazulu started playing football, a different brand of football, something that the fans like. Reminds you pretty much of the way football's been played in Europe. Yet it has that gussie flavor that everybody looks for in every PSL team. Now it's like the honeymoon phase was over, and then the draws start coming. And do you think for a second that there was doubt in the fans' minds that Benny is the right guy for the job?
Look, I mean, obviously, like you said, he came in midway last season, and he went on this run that was crazy. I think he had about like 14 games in a row where he didn't lose, and it was just a lot of wins that they were picking up and putting pressure on Mamelodi Sundowns as well. And then you come into this season, and everybody was sort of expecting, okay, so you guys finished second. And you guys finished second. So let's see if you guys can replicate that. Let's see if you guys can catch Mamelodi Sundowns. And in fairness, even Ben McCarthy said his own words in terms of saying that if he had started the season from start, who knows where the team could have been. So now eventually he comes in, and then there's a lot of draws that he picks up, and maybe you start to get a feel that did maybe Amazulu overachieve last season. Maybe there's a bit of them having to overachieve in terms of finishing second. So now they find themselves having to pick up draws after draws. And yeah, I guess there were questions at Benny McCarthy being asked in terms of what happened to last season, because majority of the squad is still the same. But he's picked up a win. He pushes up to fourth. I think Amazulu staying with him till the end of the season will probably be the best decision right now.
Well, it looks like we've got a new entrant to the party. Coach Farouk Khan, thank you so much for joining us on the show. Always good to have you, man.
Always a pleasure, man. I just had to go make salah, so sorry for my not being punctual.
No, it's fine. We hope that you prayed for Benny and his boys, because they certainly got the 3 points that myself and Shakes were just breaking it down. Coach Farouk, I mean, while we have you here, right? Sorry, what's that?
So you spoke about Benny winning the 3 points.
Yes.
I watched the game, and I just thought both teams deserve to get a draw. I don't think any of the two teams deserve to get 3 points. Benny was a little fortunate. A little bit naivety on the part of Galant, simply because they gave away so many fouls. And it was like, I was just saying to my son, it's going to be a matter of time before Azulu punished them. And inevitably, with not so much time left on the clock, that decisive goal was scored. I think Marumo's defense were poorly set up aerially, even though they have quite a number of very tall players. They still weren't able to deal with the initial corners, and ultimately the set piece was the undoing. So it comes back again to the fact that our teams properly organized both offensively and defensively in set plays. And I think there's a lot of room for improvement in the PSL in regard to that, with the exception of maybe teams that have the quality of players that can punish you. In those situations, we see Kaizer Chiefs have got those type of players that can hurt you at times. But generally, I think it's an area that's been neglected.
Well, Coach, looking at that, myself and Shakes were just breaking things down of how Coach Benny came in last year, had a honeymoon phase with the Amazulu team, and then all of a sudden they went through a bit of a rough patch in their marriage, if you want to call it that, from earlier this year. And we asked the question that, do you think that the fans ever had any doubt in their mind that Coach Benny was the man for the job? And I mean, you are coach, you've been in the game for many years. How does that happen when you go on such a glory period and then all of a sudden nothing seems to go your way?
Well, it comes back to something that I experienced many years ago. You know, when we started out coaching, we were fortunate to have a mentor like Ted Dimitro. And then in 1992, I was fortunate to get a bursary to go and study in Brazil. And then I realized what goes into preparing a team to ensure that there's longevity in performance. And by that, I mean, you need to have a very well set out periodized plan. Now, periodization is a scientific term used for planning, whether it's football, rugby, any sport, you need to have a periodized plan. And what goes into a periodized plan is short, medium term, and long term planning. And now, to ensure that those plans work, there's a number of aspects that you need to take into account. And one of them being, do you have the quality to sustain performance over a period of time? Because motivation can have its benefits in the short term. And I do think, you know, a player of Benny's or a coach of Benny's stature coming in there, having had so much experience playing in some top leagues, winning a championship league, the players were in awe of him, and obviously his motivation really inspired them. But when motivation ceases to exist, like in anything in life, you have an upward curve and then you have a downward curve. Then you need to obviously dig deep. Does he have the quality of players? Are the players adequately prepared? Because on a number of occasions, he lambasted players for poor technique, for lack of tactical acumen, etc., etc. So, you know, a lot of people may have taken it wrongly, but I do understand where Ben is coming from. The thing is, we need to ensure that the technical level of our players in the PSL needs to improve dramatically. I mean, today I watched the game and I could count not more than 5 passes from each team, and this was the possession turnover. Now, if your technique is not refined, anything a coach plans tactically falls to pieces. And I think, with all due respect, I empathize with current coaches in the PSL. I do think a lot needs to be done at the lower levels to ensure that these players are technically astute. So when they get to the Premiership, there's no time to learn in the Premiership. You need to hit the ground running. You need to carry out a coach's tactical plan and strategies. And we need to be realistic as South Africans and admit the fact that technically our players are not at the level that they should be at.
So just breaking things down, and I mean, with the players not being technically on that level, where do we come in as the general public? Because now you've got the likes of myself, the likes of Shakes. Coach, I know that you always tread a fine line when it comes to that, but guys like myself and Shakes are the guys that are putting it out there, sharing our opinions, voicing our opinions and our thoughts on what's happening in the league. And ultimately, we're the guys that nobody likes in the public, because we have to be honest. We have to give you the honest truth. But where do we draw the line? Because it's almost like we're on a merry-go-round when it comes to changing coaches and not looking at the deeper issue, that is the players that are not coming to the party.
I think it's, you can't really fault players. I think we are as a consequence of our work, players do suffer the brunt. I think if you recall, a number of years ago when I was at Chiefs, the players that came through were able to hit the ground running. And I think the emphasis for me was what I learned in Brazil about technical excellence. So the likes of Jabu Pule and Klanta Kubeka, these players were able to bridge the gap from academy football to professional football. And obviously, the likes of Mushina Tigral and Ted Dimitro knew exactly how to blood these players in. I think a good example currently to use is Sundowns. Sundowns is a team that have phenomenal technical expertise. Most of the players that they have are technically very comfortable on the ball. Therefore, you can see when their coaches plan for a particular game, they are able to carry out those plans, those tactical aspects of the game, the strategies. Now, if you look at the flip side of it, you have teams like Orlando Pirates, etc., that do have talented players that they've signed, but ultimately they lack that, I would say, that X factor to be able to maintain possession, to use possession as a means to an end. Sometimes we talk about possession and we look at stats, but where is the possession being kept? Is the possession being kept in areas where you can hurt the opposition? And often there's a lot of trends in modern football. People are talking about the build-up from defense. They're talking about counter-pressing. They're talking about high press. And it's all those terms have been in the game for as long as I can remember. It's just that we use different terminology. When I played football, we said close down the opposition. Now they say high press. So it's just terminology that has changed. But the game itself hasn't changed that dramatically. So what I'm trying to allude to is the fact that if you invest as wisely as Sundowns have in the type of players they have, and the technical team is also an astute technical team that's working very effectively with their talent. You found A player like Sereno comes off the bench, having been not being active for a while, and he decides the game against Golden Arrows. That's important. You have a man down. You got your backs faced against the wall. You're not playing the type of flowing football that you have, because again, you're coming up against a team like Arrows who play very good in the offensive phase. So they're always going to give you problems, but you still manage the outcome. And then you have a player like Mshishi Zwane, who's able to change a game at any moment. He's so talented, so gifted. And this is, for me, the big question. Do teams in the PSL have that balance? Do we have the Dr. Kumalos, the Shoes Michels of the past? Do we have a Lucas Radebe that can play out of defense? And we must admit that we don't have that time. We have a few. We have currently players at Sundowns that possess some of those qualities. So in essence, what we need to do is reinvent ourselves and find out why is it that we don't have the same quality of players, the Thabo Mokis. I was very fortunate to work with some of those players. If I look over now at the current PSL teams, excluding Sundowns, there's not many teams that have that quality of player. And that is really alarming for me.
No, definitely. I mean, it's certainly something that could be discussed. But I mean, Shakes, Coach Farouk's mentioned so many things here, and he's highlighted Sundowns, right? But now you look at the budget that Sundowns has compared to what majority of the other teams have. Shakes, do you think that Sundowns are ultimately here to compete or win? Or do you think that the other teams are just not using their budgets as effectively and just not stepping up to the party?
Yeah, no, I think Farouk Khan has obviously mentioned a lot of good things. He's mentioned in terms of the technical team having to use the talent. And I think that's the most important key thing I'd like to focus on is that, do Sundowns have the resources? Yes, I do believe that they do have the resources, but they are able to use that talent that they have and coach that talent as well to get the best out of that talent too. Now, you find that other teams as well where you sort of feel like the plans, the structures, they're not there in that particular way. I do not believe that a team like Kaizer Chiefs, with the talent that they have, they cannot be closer to Mamelodi Sundowns. I don't believe that a team like Orlando Pirates can be closer. Of course they can be closer, but the question is that is the technical team getting the best out of the talent that is currently there? And I think, like Farouk Khan has said, it is that I think Sundowns have used that talent very sublimely. I look at Orlando Pirates and I look at some of the signings that they've made from different clubs over the years. When you look at the Fortune Makaringas, when you look at the Sipasihle Ndlovus, for example, that have come in that were stars at their previous teams and were destined to have some really good careers. Have they really gotten better? Is it down to also the fact that the technical team is not getting the best out of them as well, not utilizing them in the best places on the pitch? So I just think some of the players too, Tyson Chatwa, for example, I don't think he's a bad player, but for some reason, as they move on to these clubs, they don't seem to progress in the way that they were progressing before.
No, that's true. It's quite a valid point, because I mean, if you look at Hlatshwayo in his days at Wits, he was a monster. I think his performances in that Wits team secured him his spot in the national team. But then, as time goes on, he sort of just faded into being another player on the team sheet. If you look at things today, Coach, with a player of that magnitude, what happens to them at big clubs? Do they either fall away or rise to the occasion? Because you mentioned the defender there, and look at a midfielder, for example, the likes of Keegan Buchanan. He came to Kaizer Chiefs. He became another name on the team sheet. And now all of a sudden, he finds himself playing the football of his life again, the football that we know him to play, winning man of the match week in and week out again. Coach, what happens to this aspect, and where are players kind of losing it and getting their mojo back in this process?
Well, there's a number of factors. We could talk on this and elaborate quite a number of points, but I think, again, we have a tendency as coaches to destroy talent at times, and we must admit that often that is the case. You look at Hlatshwayo, he was at Wits, he was phenomenal, but again, he played a different game to what is expected at Orlando Pirates. At Ajax, under Foppe de Haan, also formidable, unbelievable, didn't just get to Pirates by accident. And you have to ask the question, how can a good player of his caliber suddenly become so ordinary, making so many errors? Again, there's a lot of confusion in this whole situation. And I think it comes back to a point that I once asked a coach or a tactical coach in Brazil, Carlos Alberto Pereira, when he was one of our lecturers in 1992. I said to him, what is, in your opinion, the success of a successful team? And he used the word balance. And I was really surprised because, what are you saying to me, coach? You say balance, elaborate. And later on, he said, think about it. And we came back a day or two later and we couldn't still answer what he was really saying in as far as balance. And then he used an example of the Argentinian team that won the World Cup with Mario Kempes, and then there was Adiles, and there was Galeco. Those were the three midfielders that were playing in the midfield of Argentina during that time. They beat Holland, who had a phenomenal team as well in that particular World Cup. It was in Argentina. And he said, if you look at that particular team, just to mention the midfield, each player knew what his particular role was. So Galeco was its number 6, a defensive midfielder. He hardly ever got past the halfway line. So his main job was to create stability in that midfield. Adiles was a playmaker of note. Eventually went to Tottenham Hotspur, and him and some of the other Argentines, and did so well. Kempes was an attacking midfielder, but he scored the most goals in the tournament. He wasn't a number 9. He wasn't a striker. So he said, if you look at the balance that they've had in that midfielder, it then complements all the additional players, your wing backs, your strikers, and everybody else. Because once you have a core which balances a team, and I can go back to Barcelona when they had Xavi, Iniesta, and Messi. Messi was out of this world. The moment Xavi and Iniesta retired, Messi wasn't the same player. So I think a lot of teams miss that important balance in their team. You look at currently Orlando Pirates, they have a player who's phenomenal in as far as his ability to link play from defense to attack. His name is Cabello Dlamini. I know the boy because he was with me for many years in the academy. This boy has the ability to dissect any defense, but he always comes on as an impact player. So sometimes coaches rather go for a very solid defensive midfield where they sometimes play with 2 6s. But it's not in the makeup of Orlando Pirates, because over the years, Orlando Pirates, Kaizer Chiefs were always known to be a team with flair, with that attacking ability, with that ability to rotate the ball and use the ball to destroy well-structured defenses. We don't see that anymore. Today, Kaizer Chiefs have become known as a team that plays on transition. Orlando Pirates, to some extent, have a blend of the two. I just think the identity is the reason why we don't see these top teams excelling the way we see Sundowns excelling. Let's give you an example. If tomorrow Sundowns decide to change their technical staff, the philosophy will still be ingrained. Whoever comes in will have to play this the way Sundowns is currently playing. And that foundation has been left from the time Pizzo was there to the current situation that we find in. Even though Pizzo had left, the team is still a formidable team, both locally and on the continent. So surely they have done what great teams do. They've got a philosophy and a style of play and a footballing model that's unshakable. If you look at a team like Chiefs or Pirates, you don't know what to expect from game to game. They could look phenomenal in a game, and suddenly when you expect them to repeat that performance, you see something totally different in the next fixture. I don't know, Shakes, if you agree with me on that.
I definitely do. I was actually even about to ask you a question as you finished, because you're right in terms of the philosophy is not necessarily the same. I mean, when I grew up watching Kaizer Chiefs, there was sort of that flair, there was sort of that, let's get the ball forward. But now you can see the Chiefs that is now, and even the one that won things understood back in 2015, they were more of a transitional side. And I wanted to ask you in the sense that, has the number of coach changes for both clubs, being Orlando Pirates and Kaizer Chiefs, has that hurt the philosophy of both teams?
I think to a large extent it has, because if you look back, when I joined Kaizer Chiefs in 1997, to be precise. One thing I heard from the chairman was that we are a team that possess the ball. We're a team that keep possession of the ball. This is our philosophy. Now, currently, if you look at all great teams around the world, they have a philosophy which is ingrained. For example, we have adopted at the academy a philosophy to keep the ball on the ground, triangulation, limited touches, change the point of attack. Now, those 4 statements can sound very basic, but however, if you elaborate on them, you can find that is basically the way you want to play as a team. And I think this is common with all great teams. If you look at Barcelona, Bayern Munich, those how can I say, those pillars are very, very important to the success or failure of the team. You look at the time when Bayern Munich was successful winning the treble. They still went and ensured that they hired Pep Guardiola, even though their coach at the time was the most successful coach in Europe. And the reason they did that was because they felt that Bayern Munich was losing their philosophy, their style that could compete with the rest of the world. They felt that the old Bayern Munich style wasn't sufficient to become a world dominant force. So what did they do? They went and fetched Pep Guardiola from Barcelona to say, you come and reinvent us. And I think he did do that to a large extent because you still find them playing the same type of football that he introduced to them. Not that Bayern Munich wasn't successful. It's just that they realized that with the way the game is evolving, they need to reinvent themselves. I think we don't reinvent ourselves. We take things on face value. We sort of take things out of context. We see what clubs around the world are doing, and we try to bring it into our game, not realizing that we are changing our DNA. If you look at South African players, we have a totally different DNA to other players in Africa. So you need to take into account, firstly, the player's culture. Where does he come from? If he comes from KwaZulu-Natal, what is his culture like? You need to respect his culture. You need to respect his diet. You need to respect what makes him that particular person. But if you go against that for some reason and you try to enforce a certain mentality, a certain culture on him, you're not going to get the best out of him. When we had a player that came to us and he came to the academy, the first thing I would look at is, where is he from? What is his culture like? For example, we had a player called, he was with me in the academy, it slips my name. And when he came the first time when I met him, Simpiwe Mbambo. When he came the first time and the academy was already having players, he looked down on the ground when he was speaking to me. But I was fortunate enough to realize, as a Zulu person, it is a mark of respect when you look down. But if he had spoken to a European coach and looked down, the coach would have said to him, why aren't you looking at me in the eyes? Are you trying to hide something? So this just is a small example of what you were asking. Why is it that quality players are not performing at the highest? Is because we don't really get into their minds. At this level of professional football, I would say it's 80% what happens upstairs that actually reflects as far as defeat is concerned. So the 80% upstairs will determine what happens down at the player's feet. So if the 80% is well structured, is well coordinated, is well reinforced, then you'll find a player performing. But I don't think we do enough of that. I think we only look at the player's ability on the park. We don't look at what makes the player, firstly, the personality he is. You spoke about Klatwayo. Maybe there's deeper problems that he's faced with. What should be done, instead of just benching him, we should look at what has happened during this transition from where he was, national team captain, to the current form. You can't just become ordinary overnight. And I think that is the case with a lot of players. You find players like Kabelo Dlamini. You find many skillful players being sidelined simply because the current philosophy of transition football doesn't require players like that. You don't need a playmaker. You can play through the midfield. You can play over the top. You can play off the second ball. You can play this high speed games. And why would you need players? Another question comes to mind, Nobo. Nobo is a talent at Kaizer Chiefs. The chances of him playing regularly may not be that good because maybe he's surplus to what the coach looks at as far as philosophy is concerned, or style is concerned, or game model is concerned. I don't know if that answers you.
No, it makes sense. And I mean, the main purpose of this show was to look back at this year, and off air, myself and Shakes spoke about a number of things. And now that you brought culture into this, Coach, we've seen earlier this year we had the likes of Coach Rulani take on the national coach for his philosophy and what he brings into the team behind the scenes with regards to the players not having their phones with them. I mean, all of these simple things. And Coach Rulani went on and he took the coach on. Now, this is the thing. Getting an international coach into our local setup, into our national team, for example, yes, he might be the best coach out there, but I mean, shaking things up drastically in the national team camp, taking players out of their comfort zone. Do you think that this has an effect on the on-field performance of the players? Because, I mean, you're now being taken out of your comfort zone. You're away from your families. Yes, in this day and age, there is forms of communication to stay in contact with your families, which is your cell phone. And now something as simple as that. So do you think that culture shock to our national team could have been the reason we haven't been performing at a higher level along with many other things?
I think it's a consequence of educating players at a young age, in as far as professionalism is concerned. I think, with due respect to what coaches do, and I'm never going to question another coach's methods because it's methods that he has adopted for his specific group. But personally, I believe that you need to instill. Firstly, you need to trust to be able to be trusted. In other words, your players will only show trust if you show trust in them. But obviously, that trust can sometimes be abused. So it comes back to the point that when he takes away phones from professional players, there's many ways that they can communicate. So, in most cases, these players have 3 phones. So if you take away one phone, they probably have 2 in their bag somewhere. So I don't think that's going to solve the aspect of discipline. But I think if discipline is ingrained, if you look at, again, I want to use an example of Barcelona. They don't often camp for matches, which we as South Africans do. When I was in Spain, I questioned the fact that why is it that players drive from their homes to the game? And it was said that they are more comfortable. They were with their families the day before the game. They're not under any stress. And because they are professional, they won't drink. They won't sleep late. They'll respect it because they respect their profession. I think it has to come to a point where we make players understand the importance of professionalism. You ask a player from Europe, when is your off days? He'll tell you probably 1 or 2 weeks during the Christmas break. And that's all. For the entire year, he's preoccupied as a professional, being paid to do a job. So I don't think we as South Africans have a professional ethic when it comes to players. You look at players after a training session, they probably go to Nando's, or maybe Nando's is a healthy option. They go to McDonald's. So for all the effort that he's exerted during a session, the diet that he has doesn't give him the sufficient nutrients to put back into his body what he requires to build up his body to become a mean machine. I saw this once when I was at Chiefs. After I left the village, I found Tabu Muke at McDonald's because I used to go buy a meal there. But I'm not a coach. I'm not a player. I'm a coach. So I can have a McDonald's meal. And I said to Keza the next day, that Keza, this is a problem. And being an open-minded, progressive person, he then built a kitchen. So every player, every technical member after a session would have a 3-course meal. And I think that was fantastic during that time. So we changed the norm with players go either to a chisa nyama, a car wash, have some meat, play music. So this is the area that I think needs to be professionalized. We call our football professional, but we are not fully professional. In Europe, when I went to Porto and Benfica, they have a place for players to, after the morning session, they have lunch. They have a place for them to have a siesta. So they sleep in their little room with a television, and they get ready for the afternoon session. So it's a 8 to 5 type of job. It's not a part-time job. I think South African football, we still part-time because very few teams, I may stand corrected, maybe of late, there's been teams that are full-time. But I think if you want to develop the level of professionalism, you have to have players full-time in. And I think coming back to your question about the national team, this is where when coaches like that come in, they need to surround them with people with the expertise and knowledge of the local player. Often we find that a person is selected to assist him, but that person has never coached at the highest level. That person hasn't got an understanding of what makes a South African player tick. How do you get into his mind? Because those are very important things. And then what happens is an emotional decision is made. Okay, these guys are not disciplined. Take away the phones, deprive them of this. And I just think at some stage, when you do that to well-established players, they rebel. And maybe that's one of the reasons why the coaches opted to use more of the younger players, because younger players are easily able to be handled in that situation. But when you have a top player like Dr. Kumalo and you say to him, listen, give me your phone, he's going to look at you and say, but hang on, why should I give you my phone? Philip Trousseau, who said to the doctor once that you can't eat bread. And doctor went during the lunch break and got quite a few rolls. And Philip got so angry, he took a whole basket of bread and he went and put it on doctor's table, almost throwing it on him. So this is where the naivety of coaches from outside come in, where they expect our players to be like European players, but we're not. We are wired differently. And it's so important to understand that, because you're dealing with the player. You need to know his background. You need to know what makes him tick. And if you do that, I promise you the performance you get will be of a very high standard.
No, definitely. Shakes, what's your thoughts on that? I mean, you had quite a bit to say on social media once the news broke about that. I mean, what was your take on the entire situation? Do you think that it could have been handled differently? Just the whole situation as a whole, man.
Yeah, no. So I'm basically watching it from the TV. I'm watching it. I'm listening to it from the radio. I'm watching it off social media. So I'm not necessarily within the camps and with the same experience that Farouk Khan would have. But obviously, when Rulani said what he said about the coach, and obviously the coach hit back in terms of him saying that it was a little bit disrespectful. It was kind of interesting because I just thought that surely they've got each other's numbers. Surely they're able to communicate with one another. And I don't think it gave sort of a better light with regards to, is the national team coach in line with the coaches that are coaching our current teams at this moment? And it's something that personally for me, I don't like to see that. I personally don't like to see images like that because I want everybody to be working together and working towards one goal. So when that came out, it didn't really look so good.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And I mean, you spoke about obviously the national team and no alignment and things not looking good. But we've also had in this year, 2021, a few moments that didn't look as good. Your national coach again, in another example, pitching up to one of the biggest stadiums in South Africa for to attend a league match and not being allowed entry. I mean, come on. I'm sure that someone has to know who this guy is. Coach Farouk, what do we do in situations like that?
It's quite sad that simple things like that can't be coordinated better. I think we need to give the national coach all the support necessary. And if he does fail, then he cannot make an excuse and say that he hasn't been empowered. I think often we find that when we have a national coach, we don't rally around him. There was a time when he wanted a meeting with the PSL coaches, and I think that should have been something that should have been facilitated, because then once you have a working relationship, then you don't have these problems that were mentioned where players come back injured, where they become overtrained. I think it's as long as I can remember, club coaches have been complaining about national team coaches overtraining their players and players coming back with injuries. And I think, to be fair, if that is the case, why don't we open up dialogue between the two parties to ensure that whatever the national coach does is in line with what's happening at club level? Because surely what they're doing at club level, I'm not certain whether the national coach knows exactly, and vice versa. So until such time that you build up that relationship, you'll always have these scenarios. And I agree with Shakes. There's platforms to take these issues up. And if you go public, then obviously you're giving people or the public the impression that there's no harmony between football people. Because what is important, and I experienced this in Brazil, where I would see coaches on match day being on separate benches, but after that they would get together and they would have an indaba where they discuss football problems in the country, which was so nice to see. You know, we attended a university called Estácio de Sá, and Carlos Alberto ran a workshop there with people like Zagallo and some of the former great players that were becoming coaches. And they facilitated us to make sure that it was done in English as well. And we found that the same guys that are adversaries during the match days are now friends when it comes to the learning side of things, where they share knowledge, where they share experiences. But come match day, you know, we are on two different sides of the benches, and we are now opponents, you know. And I think that would be healthy. And I think in South Africa there is that relationship with coaches, but we don't interact enough. We don't get together more often and discuss what our problems, because our problems are huge. We have the best league on the continent, arguably. Yet we don't produce the best group of players to play in Europe and abroad, because the national team strength ultimately, whether we like it or not, is going to depend on how many players we have playing in the top leagues. Because it would be unfair to expect a national team to compete with players who are playing in the best leagues and not have players playing in the best league, as I said. You know, you had Percy going to England. I would have loved him to stay a bit longer and hopefully get more game time. He's now gone to Egypt. So if you look at it now, currently we don't have a single player that's playing in the top leagues. Yes, we have Luther playing in Denmark, but I'm talking top leagues. I'm talking Premier League. I'm talking about La Liga. I'm talking about German Bundesliga. This is where most of the nations have their best players play. If you go now and you look at teams that are going to compete in the 2022 World Cup, I guarantee you that at least 90% will come from those 3 leagues. And that just shows we need to be in those leagues to be able to compete on an even footing. It's no pie in the sky. Even if we had beaten Ghana and gone through, my fear was that if we meet Algeria or we meet one of the other superpowers in Africa, we would come back with our tails between our legs, because that is the reality of it. Whether we want to admit it or not, because I think we are so patriotic at times, we lose sense of being level-headed or being logical in our utterances. Because yes, we want to see the national team do well, but until such time that we don't put the proper structures in place, until such time that you don't have any Dick Harry coaching your youth teams, people in our youth team should be the best technicians you have, because they are laying the foundation for your national team. And without any disrespect intended, we don't have that at our youth team level. We have people that have been brought in for reasons unbeknown to people like ourselves. And we don't mention it because we want to always be politically correct. We don't want to rock the boat. We don't want to make people feel uncomfortable. But if you look again at the models in world football, whether it's Spain, whether it's Holland, they have their best coaches. Their best, when I say best, I mean the best technicians, even better than their premiership coaches, laying the foundation for those youth teams. And that is why you see players eventually emerging into the national team and being able to become world beaters.
But Coach, I if you don't mind me asking, Takira, is that you've mentioned in terms of what's happened in Brazil, you've mentioned what's happening within different countries out there, and when I hear a sense of you speaking in terms of how the players are coached, how the coaches are talking amongst one another, how there is dialogue, how there is unity, how there is, I guess, honest truth in terms of where they have to send players out. And Brazil do that a lot, where they send a lot of the young players out to go and play, like Rodrigo at Real Madrid, Vinicius Jr. at Real Madrid. They're so young and already they're importing so much good talent. It makes it sound like it's very simple what you're saying that they're doing. I'm just surprised as to why are we not as dialoguing or communicating or togethering, or players having a structure, or it confuses someone from the outside just being like, wow, he mentioned stuff that is great and it's culturally great, how they're doing it that side, but how come we are not there? I thought if everybody wanted the same goal, and that was having Bafana fun at the World Cups, having to compete for AFCONs, having that Kaizer Chiefs side you were part of, the Orlando Pirates side that used to be very successful. Why is everything not so cohesive, I would say?
I think there's a number of reasons. One of them being that we have a culture where we bring each other down. Shakes is doing so well. I watch you on Twitter, I watch your comments, and I think you're doing an excellent job. You just need somebody to give you that push and say, take your rightful place in football, in analysis, in commentary, etc. Hopefully that will happen. But the chances of it happening is something where somebody else is blocking that from happening because of their insecurity in their space. So we don't want people who are doing good things to progress, because then we become sidelined, we become marginalized. To some extent, to give you an example, when we came back from Brazil in 1992, we came back with so much information, but nobody called us to give that information besides Ted. We took all the information and then utilized it in the education of coaches and coaching teams. And later on, when Carlos Pereira came to South Africa and he said exactly what we could have said in 1993 when we got back, suddenly everybody was raving about what he was saying. And yet we thought and said, but hang on, we could have told you that 15 years ago. But it's because we are South Africans, it wouldn't have been welcome. That information wouldn't have been the same than this man who's won a World Cup. When he says it, being a World Cup winner, people sit up and listen. But if Farouk and his colleagues, it was myself, James Mabena, Mike Ntombela, and Junaid Mal, we were the first 4 South Africans to study at the Brazilian Academy. But because we came back, nobody found it, important. Yes, we had a seminar where we showed them a video of Pereira. We explained to us his preparation for the 1994 World Cup. And fortunately, between you and I, that information was used with the 96 team. I'm glad to say that information went to him, to Clive, and it was used by Jomo as well. And I'm glad to say it helped tremendously. Basically, he explained his tactics, how he plays, what they do in possession, what they do when they lose possession, and how he was going about building this team that didn't have the best players. Because arguably, earlier on in 82 and onwards, they had better players. They had the likes of Zico, Socrates, etc. Much better team. So this time around, after so many years, they had to win a World Cup because for 20 odd years, they didn't win a World Cup. And it was imperative to bring back the pride of Brazilian football because they were exporting the players, yet not winning a World Cup. It was important for them to win it. Didn't play the best football, won on penalties against Italy, but still was able to bring back the pride, and then they built on that. And that's the subsequent success. So coming back to your question, Shakes, I think we tend to want to undermine people that can have positive change simply because they may not agree with us. In some cases, they are too outspoken. They say it the way it is. Secondly, they don't allow themselves to be exploited because they would ask you to be remunerated like you would when you employ a coach from Europe. I was once offered the under-17 job, and at that time, Carlos Pereira was earning 1 point something million, and I was offered 17,000 rand to coach the national under-17. Now, it's not that I wouldn't do it for free if I had, but on principle, how do you offer somebody 17,000 to build your future generation of players coming through? So this under-17s and under-20s was just something that happens when they call together a group of boys made up mainly of players from 4 or 5 of the top teams, and you miss out on phenomenal talent that probably is playing somewhere in the township, but your scouting network doesn't touch that kid. Asiyabonga Nomvete doesn't play in your under-17, under-20 team. He's probably lucky to get into the under-23s because he's happened to be playing for a professional team at 21 or 22. But other than that, nothing's going to happen. Tokelo Ranti never played for 17, under-20, under-23, but he played for the national team. And obviously, his lifestyle killed him, but I think he was one of the first players who scored a brace in Nigeria ever from all the national teams that took place. He really had a short career, but if he had been more disciplined, I think he could have done wonders. Just some of the examples of what I think is happening. And we are blessed with one thing, Shakes, and that is so painful for me. When I studied in Brazil, I asked them to expose me to some of their youth programs. And I promise you, when I looked at the nines, raw for raw talent, we have better talent than them in this country. Raw talent. I mean, currently, I have kids in my under-13. If you watch them play, it will bring tears to your eyes. The only thing that I'm scared about is somewhere along, somebody's going to come and grab them and, do it whatever they have to. I'm trying to keep them together. It's a group of boys that I've had together for the last 5 years. But I become emotional when I see them play. And I've been fortunate to develop or work with some very talented players. But, there's players that when I think about them and on holiday, it just brings so much joy to me to think that in 5 years' time, with what I have planned for them, they're going to become world beaters. But what we're going to do with these world beaters is a concern for me.
Coach, on that point, I mean, you brought up such I think you struck a nerve that many coaches for the smaller teams are actually talking about right now. Earlier this week, we've seen that the PSL revealed that there's going to be a new competition introduced where all 16 teams will be divided into 4 groups, and they'll comprise of 4 teams which will compete against each other. And this will be called the DStv Compact Cup. So this was announced earlier this week. And we do know that this is more of giving the game back to the fans and getting more engagement. We love the concept. We love everything. However, the coaches of the smaller teams have been complaining. They're saying things like their players are now going to be exposed to being coached by maybe a Chiefs coach or a Pirates coach. And it's been their dream all their life to play for Chiefs or Pirates. And now all of a sudden, your players are working in this environment with this coach. The coach has direct access to the players, planting thoughts in his head. Yes, for the general public, they might think us in the sporting industry are blowing this thing out of proportion. But let's be realistic. I'm a 16-year-old kid. I played Disky Challenge. I'm now moved up in my first season with the senior team, 17 years old. Dreams are being sold that I can go play for Chiefs or Pirates by the man in charge. Coach, after that tournament, when I come back into your camp and you all of a sudden criticizing me on a regular. Yet at the back of my mind, I know I've got probably one of the coaches I want to play for that's rubbing me up the right way, saying the right things to get the best out of me. Do you think this messes with the morale of the team?
No, I don't think so. I think coaches have access to players. They have scouts. They have, you could meet a player after hours in a coffee shop, etc. I don't think that will have a huge effect. I mean, big clubs are looking for big players. So a youngster coming through has to still prove himself. I think currently you see a number of players at Kaizer Chiefs that have been promoted, and sometimes we have a tendency to question the coach's selection, but we're not in the coach's shoes. And sometimes because of the type of football the coach is playing, those players are not suitable enough. But then again, you must understand that if the player's development cycle has been complete, those players will have to adapt to the different coaching styles, etc. And I think sometimes that's a bit of a challenge where our players that we develop are not holistically developed. So when they change, you can find this very common where you have a tendency with players coming from Cape Town. They don't really, very few of the Cape Townian players are able to, really make a mark when they come down to Gauteng. There's a few that have, but in general, there's many that have come and failed. So they're used to a certain style of play. And when they come to a different province, they can't adapt. And I think to some extent, this Diski challenge it reminds me when we grew up, when there was a government that didn't allow us to play together as a one Bafana team, where they had an Indian colored and African team playing against each other. And in those days, the white teams used to dominate because of the type of football they played. They played aerial football, and most people that came from underprivileged areas where there was no proper fields, not proper goalposts, would suffer the brunt of this aerial attack. It was like getting bombarded. They get the ball down the line, they cross it in, and they had one of the best headers because they were training on fields that were huge enough to accommodate that type of play. Whereas the kid from the township played on a very small patch where the ball never really went into the air. So he never learned the art of heading. And that's currently the problem, even with the current generation of local players, where heading is not something that we excel in. And there's a number of factors for that. Firstly, we're not physically astute to be able to become great headers of the ball. There was maybe a small percentage of players like Lucas and them that could, but generally across the board, our players are not very good aerially. So when they played against those type of teams in those days, they would excel. So this is maybe just a similar thing where you had these, but now it's packaged differently where you have provincial teams, like a provincial tournament. I think from a marketing perspective, people will enjoy it because you're now going to see players from that particular province playing. The challenge you're going to have is how do you justify that when you choose a team from, let's say, Gauteng, how is it possible that not the bulk of the team comes from Sundowns? Because
they've made the well, I know the initiative is to make the fans vote. I'm not advocating for it. I'm just saying what they said what would be. So basically, they don't want a team that's going to compromise of majority Sundowns players, for example. So some have to come from SuperSport United. Some have to come from other teams within that region as well. So what they'll basically do is they'll give you a position and they'll give you 4 options, but they're not going to give you 4 Sundowns options. They'll give you 1 from SuperSport, 1 from Sundowns, and then 1 from another team within that region, maybe Kaizer Chiefs. And then you'd have to decide as fans.
Oh, I see. So it's not like when you choose for the Carling Cup or you choose your best place. In other words, Chiefs having the bulk of the support in the country and their fans vote. How will that impact? Because now you're saying they're going to stipulate the number that you allowed. So there'll be a quota for the team. Okay, that makes sense. So then obviously that makes more sense. So they'll give you 4 from each team or 5 from each team. I don't think there'll be a problem. I think we need to give this type of competition an opportunity because, again, it's gonna bring some sort of a hype, a difference to what we normally experience just in the league. And I think if it's going to be beneficial to the Premiership and it's going to bring in more money for the clubs so that they can use back. But surely, I'm sure the chairman wants to have a situation where he plows that money back into the teams, like he's done with the Diski challenge. I think it's a very good concept. I do think it needs to be improved upon as far as the structure is concerned, as far as the standard is concerned. Because I think when you say reserve league, you want players that are able to quickly make a transition from your reserve league into the first team. And I think with time and with coaches getting more information and becoming better at their art and their craft, I think we will get there eventually.
Shakes, what's your thoughts on that tournament? I mean, it's been spoken about all week. What's your take on it? Do you give it the thumbs up? Do you give it the thumbs down? And what's your reason for it?
Yeah, so when I heard the tournament, I actually thought it was not a bad tournament in the sense that you might get a team where you finally get to see Anile Jali and Tebogo Mokoena playing together, or you might be able to eventually get a team where Lorch and Kamabilet are on the same side. So from a fantasy type football, it's great to watch. Obviously, my questions was who's going to be taking care of injuries if that happens, and how is the money going to be split? Who's going to be coaching the particular teams? Because there is a number of coaches. So do fans also decide who's the coach of those teams as well, or do we have a technical team of 25, 30 people that could be there? So I think maybe it's not a case of. I think it was just a case of just having fun and being able to fantasize on having to one day see a team where Eric Mato is standing next to Nda, for example. So that's what I thought of it. I didn't think it was a bad idea. It's only going to be a few games. It's only going to be played out for a week and a bit. And I guess also considering the fact that there's no DSTV Premiership during January as well, it's something that because the people in South Africa love DSTV Premiership. When I walk around, they talk about the game. So, and also we're not competing in AFCON as well. So it gives people something to still talk about their own that they have instead of having to talk about Algeria and how Salah's doing and how Senegal is doing. And maybe some of them want to say something about Temba Zwane, for example, if he's competing in it.
No, definitely. I think it's going to be interesting. It's going to be a nice twist and spin of the new age of football in this country. And if you look at it, I think this is the direction we need to be heading in order to keep the fans engaged, especially with COVID-19, keeping the fans out of the game for so long, stadiums being empty. I think this definitely revived some energy for spectators being more involved in the game. Guys, I mean, we could chat football all night, but wrapping up the show, looking at things. Shakes, your moment for 2021 in local football, what would it have to be?
I'd have to say the women's game. Fun enough for Banyana winning the Aisha Bushari Cup.
Yeah.
The fact that we have so many of our ladies playing overseas in different clubs, the big clubs, AC Milan, Benfica, Atletico Madrid. I think seeing that is great, and just seeing Mamelodi Sundowns ladies as well having to compete on the continent, and actually you see that the similarities of the Mamelodi Sundowns men's into the women's game philosophy that Farouk Khan's been talking about throughout this whole hour. So to see that the growth within women's game, I probably would say was a huge plus. But I think also Bafana keeping fans entertained till the last game of the qualifiers in the group was also not so bad to see as well.
Coach Farouk, your moments on the year?
Well, I think for me, basically, as Sheikh said, the highlight was for the Sundowns lady winning the first inaugural CAF Champions League. And to see that a player that I coached at youth level being the coach brought a bit of pride to me as such, because I think he's doing a superb job. And to see that, everything is possible. If you can dream it, you can achieve it. I think for South Africa, whose football, as far as women's football, is in its infant stages, they've proven beyond a doubt that there's been growth with Desiree at the helm of Banyana. She's done a fantastic job. And somebody that was given the job on a caretaker basis has proven beyond a doubt that she didn't have to be a big name European coach. She had achieved more than Vera Pauw was there before her, who was basically a mentor to some extent. But she's achieved more simply because she understands the South African players to a great extent than what Vera did. I think we must respect that Vera was a top tactician. But once we develop our own local coaches like we've done at Sundowns, I think personally we won't require as many foreign coaches that become a circus where we allow them to be circulated and recycled at any given time. I think a country is only going to be as good if it empowers its own local people And what more to ask? I mean, a big club like Sundowns, who've dominated, they've got 3 South African coaches. You have Eric Tinkler, who's at Cape Town City, who's done extremely well. And you've got Benny, okay, struggling, but I think also a South African coach that with time will mature and gain more experience and knowledge. And that is so important. Nothing against foreign coaches, but I would believe, like we say with players, that if a foreign coach comes to the shores, he must be able to give us something we don't have. Like Foppe de Haan, like Ted Dimitro, like Mushin Ettegral, people that I've worked with had a lot to offer us. Currently, we find coaches coming in left, right, and center from countries we don't even know. You look at TS Galaxy's coach, and I mean, there's a lot that's been spoken about him being this top tactician. But I think even though he's coming at this time, you can't say he's made a significant change to where Owen was. And I think they've actually regressed since Owen was fired. This is my personal opinion. And I think if we get these guys, these unknowns, to come in and improve their series, it's actually doing a disservice to South African coaches, because we were the first group of 60 coaches that I attended the professional license with was the likes of Shakes. It was Steve Kumpela, it was Pizzo Mosimane, so many of us that went on that particular course, and then subsequently there was another 60 coaches that did a pro license. If 20% of them are now actively involved in the Premier League, it would be a surprise to me. So I just think once you qualify these coaches, clubs have to start showing faith in them so that football in the country grows and the coaches in the country also grow, so that we have more people like Pizzo to go abroad. And because we see this in countries that have succeeded. And I always use, and people often ask, why do I use examples? Because you have to look at best practice. You've got to look at models that are working. You look at Portugal, how many coaches have they exported in the last couple of years? Germany is another country that's exported. We must look towards exporting players and coaches so that they can bring back valuable experience and expertise to our shores, so that one day we can take our rightful place and become the number one country, firstly in Africa, and then go on to make our mark in international football.
No, definitely. I think the words that you said, they couldn't be any clearer for all the listeners and the viewers at home. I mean, if that's something that we can aspire to, Coach, you've definitely made a change, made us think a lot to end the year off with. But gentlemen, thanks once again. As we wrap the shop, I'd like to thank Shakes, Coach Farouk. Your insights that you shared with us this evening is appreciated. I think that whoever watched this and all the listeners and viewers after the show definitely leave being more educated, whether it's from a spectator point of view or from a coach's perspective. I think you guys have covered all bases that there is to cover. Gents, it is that time of the show. It's our final show for the year. For all the viewers and the listeners that have been tuning in throughout the year, thank you so much. We really, really appreciate it. Shakes, Coach, I wish you guys a blessed festive season. Stay safe out there. Remember to sanitize, keep those masks on. We do know that the wave is on the rise. So for all the listeners out there, I hope that you guys do the same. And just remember that together we can beat this virus. So guys, go have a good festive season. Spend it with your family and friends that you love dearly. Until next year, let's see what the DStv Premiership and the rest of the footballing leagues around the world have to offer us. And we'll be here to give critics that are on point and our opinion that the public holds so dearly. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
That is Shakes Rampedi and Coach Farouk Khan sharing their insights on what is currently going down or wrapping up what happened in 2021 with regards to the DStv Premiership and everything that's happening in local football. It's been an interesting one indeed. To all the listeners and the viewers of Salam Media, thank you so much for tuning in every week of 2021. Yes, we've been giving you content, the guys behind the scenes, Salilo, Sadiq, management, Ponti, Shamshir. These are brains that come together every week to ensure that the product that goes to air is immaculate. It's one of the best out there. And I mean, for a station like this to give you the quality content that they do week in and week out, I think that a big round of applause must be given to them. And yep, that might be the end of 2021, but it's not the end of our journey. 2022 is going to be bright. I mean, share some of the people that you'd like to see being interviewed on this platform. Give me ideas, give me thoughts. And I promise you, with myself and Salilo, the producer behind the show, the guy behind the scenes, putting the pieces of the puzzle together. We'll make it happen. But for now, that's it from myself, Zakir Taoud, to all the listeners and the viewers. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I look forward to chatting to you in the new year. Have a good festive season and stay safe out there to everybody celebrating throughout this time period. Just remember to stay masked up and sanitized at all times so that together we can beat this virus. And very soon, fans can return to stadiums and some sort of normality can return. But that's it from me. Assalamu alaikum.